Welcome to the Taxing Subjects Podcast, brought to you by Drake Software. I'm Ryan Norton, and once again, we're joined by some representatives from the Latino Tax Professionals Association, and also from Drake Software. From the LTPA, we have, once again, the President and CEO of Lopez Tax Service and the LTPA Executive Director, Carlos Lopez, EA. And then the LTPA Vice President of Business Development, Tony Martinez, EA. And then from Drake, we have the Drake Software Vice President of Strategic Development, John Sapp, CPA.
Good morning, Ryan. Good morning, guys.
Morning. Good to be here.
We're glad to have all of you. Yeah, we're glad to have all you guys here again today. And the topic is going to be just common issues that tax professionals face in light of a year where we have a new tax law taking effect for the most part. It's probably a good topic to go over, to see what tax professionals can do to make this an easier tax season for themselves. But before we get into that elephant in the room, the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, I would just want to ask everybody here, what do you think it's going to be like to find seasonal employees for January through April? Especially, we just had this morning, the jobs report came out, 3.8% unemployment. And I think the line from NPR was that people who are looking for jobs have them. Do you think that's going to have an impact on the job market for people trying to find those temporary employees to help process returns?
Well, we don't really suffer from that issue. We have a lot of our employees return. I believe our retention rate is 92%.
That's impressive.
So a lot of our employees, part-timers, seasonals, what we call them, do come back. However, if you are having an issue finding good help, you're probably starting too late looking for help. You probably should start right after Thanksgiving, or you should start now. Put some posters in your office that you're looking for seasonal help during tax season. I don't think the record low unemployment is going to affect our industry. I think a lot of people who want to enter into the tax preparation industry are going to do it regardless. It's not a real sexy job, but it's a good job and it pays well. So.
Yeah, and also one of the best ways that we found to find employees is to have your own tax school and your own training center. Because over the years, we found that to be the case where we start a class, let's say September, and people are always interested in learning about taxes, maybe getting a new job if that's the case. Or a lot of people that I've seen, they may want to go like from blue collar to white collar jobs at times, or may just want to get an office job, and they consider taxation and accounting, and they'll take a tax class. Let's say you have a class of 10, and if you have your own class, you can see who shows up to the class on time, who does their homework, who understands the material, and out of 10 people, you may hire 2, and you'll let them know it's seasonal. And that's a great way to recruit new employees if that's something if that's a challenge in your current firm.
And would you guys believe that, to a large degree, it seems to me that the labor market and how you potentially get your part-time help, or your seasonal help, I should say, because I don't think tax season is ever part-time, but your seasonal help, especially for those that may be expanding their business, or they've had a large growth in their area, so there's going to be a large number of tax returns, additional work coming in. Seems like a lot of those issues become local, right? And so you end up, if you're in an area with a lot of white collar jobs already, it's probably a little more difficult. So you have to focus maybe on retirees looking for that, seasonal help, or in areas of the country, especially like in the northern states, where there's more deep dark winter, and there's not as much outdoor activity during those colder months. Maybe there's the ability to kind of leverage that, whereas maybe in Florida, or where you guys are, it may be a little more difficult, but you may have more blue collar workers in areas. So it's would you agree that it's probably, it's like politics, it's all local, and
Yeah,
knowing your
all
local
local.
market and knowing what you're dealing with locally is more important than having a cookie cutter approach, everywhere across the country.
Yeah, that is so true. It's all local. It's about your region. Like up in New York or in the upper Northeast, when they have wintertime, people just don't go out of their homes, and I could see that being very difficult. But like you said, John, as long as you understand your region, you can really you can get your offices staffed. And like Tony said too, I can't emphasize enough to have your own training
that's
or something available. That's critical to any growth. And Greg, I'm sure you guys have done a wonderful job with your training center and all your podcasts and what we're doing today. This is what you got to do. This is what we're doing today.
And speaking about training, I apologize for my phone there, but speaking of training, what do you guys think about, we'll just switch over to the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. How do you think that the new tax law is going to impact classrooms for training, for earning CPE? How much of it's going to be dominated by the new tax law? And do you think that once you get past the training education, how is that going to impact clients? Like, is there going to be any kind of confusion? I apologize. Any kind of confusion arising from the changes in the tax law? And we could probably touch on the new 1040, but just if we could talk about that, I think that would be good for listeners. Just what can be expected once you go into your classrooms to earn your CPE so that you are ready for tax season, and what are some topics they could expect to see when they walk in the door?
Yeah, well, one thing that has changed is we were looking. It's funny you're talking about this because we just had a meeting with our staff yesterday, all about the new draft 1040 and schedules 1 through 6. So I think that there's going to be a lot of confusion. If you look at the new 1040, it doesn't have a place for you to mark single or married filing jointly. It's assuming that when you fill in your information and nobody else's, that if you're going to be head of household, you got to mark the head of household. If you don't mark anything, then the default is single. If you fill in taxpayer and spouse, there's no married filing joint. So the system assumes that you're married filing joint, or in California, you're a registered domestic partner. So it's going to be, that's at the very first line. So can you imagine what the rest of it's going to be like? So yeah, it's going to be confusing.
Yeah, and then also, for example, let's say you are self-employed, you're Schedule C, sole proprietor. You have to file Schedule C. You then have to file Schedule 1, because Schedule 1 has the additional income. You then have to file, you get Schedule 4, which is tax. Then you have to file Schedule SE, self-employment tax. And then all that flows into the postcard size 1040. So you see here now there's new schedules that have to be taken into account, where before it would just be a couple that would flow to the 1040. So one way to see it, the way I see it is they essentially, what they did, they dissected the 1040 into different parts. And so if you're just a W-2 simple, you have one wage, maybe no dependents, even a few dependents, you could just do it on the 1040. But if you have any additional tax, any other income, any credit, you are going to need one of the new 6 schedules, and that may cause confusion, and people don't want to risk getting a lower refund than they expect, or paying more than they have to. So they are going to be looking for help for training. If you're a tax professional, they're going to be looking for training so they can be able to help their clients. If they're an end user taxpayer, they're going to be looking for that professional. So circle back to the question, I think a lot of professionals are going to be looking for that continuing education. We're seeing our numbers really grow for our online courses and our national convention. Even the IRS tax forums are getting big numbers, and San Diego's already sold out for the IRS tax forum in San Diego. So a lot of professionals are looking for that training, And this is a year I think a lot of people are going to be just going to events because they need to get the update.
The training itself is going to be refocused, and we've all, every year you do update for taxes. I don't really know that the Tax Cut and Jobs Act training is going to be, the market is going to supply that. It already has supplied that, I think, within 2 weeks of the law being passed. And actually, I think we even did a webinar on it, right after the bill was passed, but before it was actually became law. So the market itself, and others in the marketplace have done the same thing. The market itself is going to respond and provide that tax training. The new form presents its own set of unique challenges. With over 90% or around 90% of individuals filing electronically, and a large percentage of those that file on paper are using computers, right, to prepare the taxes anyway. Even most preparers, I don't know very many preparers today that are younger than 40 years old that could fill out a 1040 by hand. Everyone is so dependent on our computers. So the data entry piece of the computer systems that everyone uses is not going to change. But what gets printed will. But the challenge is a lot of preparers, the customer may never know what a 1040 looks like. If you were to show them one today, they may not know, except for the preparer uses it as a review tool to go over their taxes, hopefully. But preparers, as they review tax returns, are going to need to be educated on how do you run down the number. For example, why is this credit different than what I had anticipated? And so you have to run through, as you guys were pointing out, you have to run through 2 or 3 schedules, whereas just going directly to a particular, I want to go to 4562 and see how my bonus depreciation worked. As that flows through 2 additional schedules to get to a 1040, the review process is going to be challenging. So there will need to be continuing education, and I'm sure we'll all provide it in a timely fashion on how do you review those numbers and how do you dig in to find the actual source of those numbers.
Right. So this was proposed to us yesterday. This is the new 1040 EZ. It's the size of a business card. I wish you guys could see this, but I'm holding up a business card that says 1040 EZ.
My tax form is smaller.
Right.
Yeah. It's a new political campaign that we're having.
But you're right. Another thing that's going to be confusing, and I mentioned this briefly yesterday, is the states. Here in California, the state has no pending legislation to change the tax forms, and we're already in July. So we're still going to have dependent exemptions. We're still going to have Schedule A miscellaneous deductions above the 2% floor. So it's going to be a challenge. And then a lot of people aren't really. Yeah, you're right. The market is going to have the training. It already does. The question is, how do people respond to it, and will they respond to it, or are they going to say? Because we hear this all the time. Well, I don't go get training because my software does it for me. Well, no, software is a tool in your toolbox. That's all it is.
Yeah.
So
this is a year more than any other that is not true.
Yeah.
And the embarrassing part, the potentially embarrassing part about that will be when clients ask to see the new form, and can you explain to me why this form is different than last year? Why did everybody make such a big deal about it? For those that aren't prepared and haven't been educated on the changes, that'll be a very embarrassing conversation to have to say, well, I don't know, but I'm a professional and I'm doing your taxes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly right. See, that's what's going to face a lot of people, and that's where we can leverage our ability to get into that market.
One other question I've been kind of thinking about, because I know a lot of the conversation surrounding the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act was simplification, which kind of plays into this whole new 1040. But for people who do itemize, say if they've been itemizing for the last 10 years, do you expect there's going to be a lot of time savings for those people, or do you think that they're going to just still do the calculations just to make sure because they've done it in the past? They want to make sure they get the best tax savings they can. I mean, even if, like, what do you think's going to happen with that?
We'll let California go first.
Thanks. Well, this year we had a 11% increase in our tax business, and the main reason, because we survey our clients when they leave, and the ones that answered said, well, we came here because we're worried about what's the new tax law going to do to us. A lot of people thought it was already in effect. They thought it was in effect for this tax season, but it's in effect for the year 2018. So that's the way. So, you know, so we did have to explain to them, well, this part of your Schedule A that you've been deducting uniforms and union dues and your employee business expenses, that's disappearing. They're, whoa, I better come back. And I go, yes, you better. So I think, so it's been a good surge. It's been a good uptick for us. And I think anybody, and then another thing too is, as long as you maintain your credibility, you maintain your stability, and so on, people will come back to you.
Yeah, and regarding Schedule A, I was reading some stats that as of last year, about 30% of people itemized, and they're estimating this 2018 tax season 2019 with the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, it's going to drop to 10%. Not just an estimate, obviously, but there is going to, with the higher standard deduction, $24,000 marriage, life, and joint, for example, then a lot of people are going to say, hey, there's no need to itemize anymore. I already have a really good deduction with the standard deduction. And so we're going to see a drop in Schedule A. So now the question is that one less form now to charge our clients to fill out? A lot of tax professionals, they charge per form, but now there's new schedules. So maybe not so. So it's just interesting to keep that in mind as the dynamic changes overall.
And one thing that I'll do a gratuitous plug for Drake Software. One thing we provided very early on during the season last year was a comparison between the 2016, 2017, and if you filed 2017 and 2018, how the new tax law was going to impact the taxpayers trying to provide that service for tax professionals. And I believe that conversation laid the framework, or at least the groundwork, I should say, for this upcoming tax season. But there's two things right now that are in favor for tax professionals. Number one is general confusion over when they hear tax simplification, but everything they hear is more confusing. Why is simple confusing? And the one thing that tax professionals have historically done, those that have been successful anyway, is they take voluminous tax code and tax interpretation, regulation, publications, and they shrink it down into one question. Yeah. Did you have any children? Well, the tax professional knows that there are 100 regs that deal with whether that is really a child that you can do something with on a tax return. But the taxpayer counts on that tax professional to ask them that question and to know the ramifications of the answer that they get. So the first thing is the confusion around tax simplification, and the second thing is opportunity. And this is where I think the marketing aspect of it can come in. There are a lot of opportunities to reduce your taxes in the new tax law, and I think Carlos brought up 199A, which is the QBI deduction. There is a lot of opportunity, especially for those in service businesses, to potentially restructure the way their income is classified, and they need a tax professional to ensure that they're safe as they do that. So there's a lot of that's just one example of many that presents itself to the taxpayer, but most of them will need a tax professional because most consumer or DIY software, it's not released until December, and so they can't even play around with the new tax law until December, and by then for a lot of companies it'll be too late to make determinations on how to really maximize the new tax law.
Right.
And talking about
I think a lot of the
go ahead.
DIY people, they're going to prepare it and then they're going to go, whoa, I owe more than I did last year. What's going on? Maybe I should go visit, a guy down the street or somebody who's got a good reputation. I think that's going to happen more frequently than not.
Yep.
Well, talking about those dependent exemptions and the changes that have come about for if you have a child or multiple children or dependents, what do you tell your clients about those changes? How do you broach that subject to them? And also, with respect to
They
EITC.
should have more kids.
We only have one right now. We'll take that under advisement.
And move to a low-income tax state.
And then what about EITC and ACTC and the CTC?
I'm just kidding
Right.
for everyone else.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. See, many preparers, I shouldn't say so many, but there's a large group of preparers who, are less than ethical and have been helping their clients with these credits that it actually forced the government to take a hard look at it, and that's why it's changed. So with one fell swoop, there's no more dependent exemptions. So if your children don't have a Social Security number and the parents don't have one, you're going to miss out on some credits that you've been getting for a long time, and that's going to cause some heartburn for a lot of people.
Yeah, especially the new family credit, the $500 non-refundable. That's a brand new credit, and so a lot of people are wondering, how does that work? Who gets that? Does my uncle get that? Does he live at home? Does he not live at home? My parents and such. So that's one way to, I guess, make up for the exemption being done. The way I see it. But yeah, just being aware of the different rules and regulations, and now all the due diligence that we have to do as tax professionals. I mean, it's been going on for a few years, but there's more and more pressure on us to make sure that the people that receive the credits actually deserve them. And there's penalties and there's audits, and it's just creating a whole big headache. A lot of tax professionals are mad. It's like, I don't get paid by the government to go and verify to that extent. I mean, am I going to go to the family's home and see if the niece actually lives in the home and see the toys and where she sleeps? I mean, to what extent do you go and take that on? And obviously, we say, do your best, get that documentation, but it does create a burden at times, because what we hear often from the client is, well, the guy across the street didn't ask me for that. The guy across the street charges me less and gives me a bigger refund. Are you sure you know what you're doing? So it's a lot of education. We got to educate our clients. And usually they come back, like Carlos is saying, if you stay ethical and if you do things right and you have a good reputation, you'll be good. But it's hard with some external pressures of clients giving you that feedback.
What about clients with dependents in, say, Mexico or Canada? Do you tell them to go ahead and get like an I-10?
Oh, yes. Yeah, you should still get your dependent exemptions, in Mexico and Canada, and I-10. The I-10 was invented by the IRS in '95. And I believe it's going to be the number, if we ever get immigration reform, I believe that will be the tracking number for these new immigrants.
Let's shift gears a little bit. I know, John, you've talked to us a lot about this in the past, but tax professionals getting ready for next season, what about data security issues? Because we've had, the WannaCry ransomware. They had the city of Atlanta got struck by a ransomware attack. It's been pretty pervasive, and I know that a lot of those issues arise from just either not updating your software or clicking links in emails that you shouldn't be clicking. But what would all of you guys counsel tax professionals listening in is like the first few things that they should do to tackle data security in their office?
Well, I'll go first on this one, fellas, because the number one issue and the number one thing that tax preparers or anyone that has any type of security issue on their computers is never, ever, 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 ever reuse a password on multiple websites. And the reason being, and by reuse, I mean they need to be unique. You can't just change your password from Apple to Apple 1 to Apple 2 to Apple 3. And if you can't remember them, find a secure way to store your passwords. But that's the number one challenge is once one particular site, for example, if LinkedIn is breached and you're using the same password on LinkedIn that you do to log into your remote system at work, then once LinkedIn is hacked, then they have computers that can instantaneously, it doesn't take days anymore, it takes a matter of minutes for them to check every website on the internet and check those credentials and come back and they see whether those credentials are valid or not. And they don't just use that credential immediately. Then they take that to the dark web and they start auctioning it off. Hey, I have a credential for a tax professional that has been verified and it works. Who would like to buy it? And then they auction that off. It goes to a professional that knows how to utilize that data. And before, it may be 6 months, it may be a year before you even find out that occurred. So the number one thing that tax professionals can do is try to use, or don't try, but use different passwords for every login that you have.
The biggest challenge that preparers have is they all think, well, I'm so small. I'm just a little, office out here in Maryland or middle of Wisconsin. So they don't, the preparer really doesn't think about someone committing a crime against them by hacking their system. And because we get calls, not frequently, but we do get calls from our members that say, I was hacked, I was compromised. Someone has sent me a ransom demand. Should I pay it? What should I do? So, first of all, okay, now we're talking after the fact. So what do you do now? But, first thing we tell them to do is call your insurance company, call the police, and then the painful part, let your clients know that someone committed a crime against you. So the thing is, how do we really impress our members about, utilizing data security systems? Because they're not that expensive, and they work. They work.
Yeah, and it's a matter of, a lot of people get started in the industry as maybe they work for someone else, then they got some clients, and they finally branch off on their own. They have 50, 60 clients, 75 clients, maybe working from home, maybe working out of a small office. And even, 100 clients, you may think, oh, that's just 100 clients. I don't even have enough money to get an updated security system or pay these antivirus. That should be fine. But, that's 100, at least 100 Social Security numbers. It could be, but these are tax returns. It could be multiple Social Security and date of birth numbers on there, right? So the fraudsters are going after these smaller shops because they know they probably have less security. They may not be able to afford the latest and greatest antivirus or security. So it's where it's kind of one of those catch-22s where do you start off even with one client and just invest all this money into having data security? And the answer is yes. If you're going to be in this industry, you need to be secured and you need to take those precautions.
What about the tax professionals who communicate with their clients and sometimes receive tax documents through email? What do you recommend that they do other than that? Like, are there some systems out there that they could use to still get documents digitally without resorting to a Gmail account or their ISP provided email?
Well, I'll do another plug for Drake. Drake has Secure File Pro integrated with the Drake software that allows that secure communication to occur, and it's seamless, just drag and drop. It's really very easy to use, very inexpensive. It can use for online data storage, and it allows that secure communication to the taxpayer. So that to me is the easiest solution out there, especially for those that maybe already be utilizing Drake tax software.
Yeah, that's why Drake is our preferred software provider, because they're forward thinking, and that's great. Yeah, you're right. A client facing portal is the most secure way to transfer your important data to your prepare or anyone else.
And the key is
sorry, go ahead, Tim.
The key is to train also your employees, if you do have employees in your office, on these topics, not just on tax updates, but on data breach as well.
And the challenge is, it's not necessarily the tax professional that has a problem sending stuff on email. A lot of times it's the clients that just don't think twice about it. And so they're sending their W-2s, they send data unsecured, and you have to train, as you're pointing out, you have to train your staff not only not to send, but when they do receive, to get that off the email server as quickly as possible. And potentially even to immediately send that client a link to Secure File Pro and say, hey, I got your stuff. I put it in our secure area. In the future, this is a more secure way to communicate. So,
and this will probably segue into our final topic, but and those are for the clients who are sending stuff. But how do you recommend, or where do you recommend people go to learn to spot phishing emails? Because while your clients, you may have trained them to use your secure portals, but someone who may have found your email address on a business card or something, who's reaching out to you as a tax professional to use you in the upcoming tax season, that means that you're opened up to the opportunity for scammers, because scammers have been in recent years really ratcheting up phishing email scams. So, and they're reaching out posing as potential clients to get you to click a link, get basically a backdoor into your system. How do you recommend people learn to spot those phishing scams? What are some resources that you would recommend they go to learn to be able to identify those would-be scammers?
Well, the first thing is we don't have a specific individual we send to, but we do have, is it the Braven agency that we're using?
Yeah, there's a couple solutions. I mean, the first one, I would say also, the IRS has a lot of great resources. And I know we saw John at the last IRCA meeting, and they had a lot of information regarding data security and data breach. And they make it a point IRS is being very proactive to train professionals to know how to spot these different phishing emails, and sometimes they're so basic. It'll say, you think it's a coworker, and they'll say, hey, check out my W-2. Do you think I'm going to pay tax this year? And then you click on the button, or I met you at the tax form. I met you, a friend recommended, or Leslie recommended me to you, or David, some basic name that more than likely you do have a client named David or Leslie. And so, you got to just be aware of that overall for that.
Well, it is really good points. It's reversed now. Used to, we sent out, and we still do this. How do you identify the bad email? How do you identify the potentially fraudulent email? And that's a good approach, but it is so bad today, and the risks are so high that you have to reverse that. And now you have to say, I am not clicking on anything unless I verify it's good. And so it's reversed. You're not trying to identify the bad. You're trying to let the good filter through and what you need to filter through, and run it through the proper procedure in order to know whether you're scanning it with a virus scan, and you're asking yourself the question, did I anticipate this person? Maybe you pick up the phone and you call them and you say, hey, did you send me an email attachment? So I think the reverse of our mentality has to change. The mentality now has to be, which links do I click on, not which links do I avoid.
Right. Yeah, it's now changed. You're right. And it all comes down to also training. Yep. We have training sessions every Wednesday morning at 8 o'clock, and we always emphasize, you're right, John, you got to emphasize with your employees and yourself. If someone's sending you and says, hey, I want to be your client, I've got some stuff attached, you have to identify who it is first, or just delete it, and hopefully they'll contact you again. You hate to turn business away, but on the other hand, if you open up an email that's vicious, you're going to pay the price.
Yeah, and that's what I do. If I get an email and it looks kind of like shady or kind of sketchy, I just delete it. And if it was an actual email, I tell them, hey, don't be sending me emails like that. Like, come on, But usually it is kind of like sketchy, so I just delete it. But yeah, just take those that have it and just delete it, and then that's easier than taking the risk,
And for those legitimate people who are reaching out, I'm sure those are great when people do that on their own and reach out to you, but what would you all recommend for trying to attract new clients for a tax professional who wants to get more business in the upcoming year? They want to do better than they did last year. What are some tactics that you would recommend to get more bodies come through the door?
Social media has been a boom for us, and I'll let Tony explain. That's his department.
Yeah, definitely. Like, for example, right now we're using Zoom. And we just started using a Zoom webinar. And with the click of a button, if you integrate right now, you could go on Facebook Live. And we have about 5,000 followers on Facebook Live. And we could be doing this webinar on also Facebook at the same time. So, but why are people going to listen? Because what are we talking about? We're talking about issues that concern them, right? We're talking about Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. We're talking about data security. So my advice to the professionals is now is the time more than ever to stand out from the crowd. Be aware of all the changes. Taxpayers are looking for these answers. Go to your Chamber of Commerce meeting. Go start a newsletter. Have a weekly newsletter. If you don't have one, that is the most basic thing you could do. There's a lot of solutions that are free, like MailChimp, Constant Contact, up to so many emails. They're free. And with the newsletter, you convey to your own clients and to potential clients that you're the subject matter expert. There's a lot of resources out there from the IRS, from Drake, from Latino Tax Pro on different articles and information on the new Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. And I mean, imagine this: if you just go on the newsletter and you just, as a title, new credit for 2019, and you're just simply talking about the family credit, $500 non-refundable. But people will open that, like, new credit. Oh man, thank you, Leslie, for sending me this great information. Or on Facebook, go live and say, hey everyone, we're going to take a quick 15-minute per segment to talk about the new family credit and how it may affect you. Or we're going to talk about how the depreciation rules have changed. And that's a perfect topic for the Chamber of Commerce, for example. So use the content that we have, capitalize on the uncertainty that has been created. A lot of confusion means a lot of opportunity for you to have the solution and the answers that people are looking for.
Yes.
And well, I think a lot of preparers that I've talked to, they're asking some good questions about, why am I potentially flat in my business growth or even losing business? Why is that occurring? I think there are two basic things that every preparer could do. Number one is do one thing, right? Just make a goal. Update my Facebook page every day with something. Or, for my business, I'm not talking about posting pictures of your cats. Not that there's anything wrong with cats. That'd be a different webinar if we wanted to discuss that. But so just do, as Tony's saying, do one thing. It's easy to get over, you get this Niagara of potential opportunities in social media. Well, you should tweet every day. Well, you should do your Instagram every day. You should do all these. Well, just do one thing and try to do it consistently, whether it's once a week, whether it's every day. And I think Latino Tax Pro has some great ideas on how to grow your business and how to impact your community. And the second thing is during tax season, consider the customer service that you're providing for every customer. Back when a lot of preparers that have been doing this for 20, 25 years, and they started, their customer service and the way that they delivered the products their customer needed was their number one focus. And I think successful tax preparers like Carlos and his business, they still do that. They train their employees to do it, and they still focus on that customer service. And that's a foundational building block, because still, even with all our social media, however that message gets out, the best message still doesn't come from the tax professional. It comes from their client. And so if you can get one of your clients to post about their experience on Facebook because you've treated them so well or you went the extra mile, then that is when you're looking for a restaurant today, none of us actually text a friend. Most of us look at Yelp or we look at, one of the review sites. 1 5-star rating can make me go to a restaurant if it's done well. And so if you have happy customers, they are still, it always has been true, that is still the strongest marketing tool that you have, is when you can get happy customers saying happy things about you, or nice things
so
about you, I should say.
true.
They may still not be happy because they may have owed tax. But,
It's so true. We've had members tell us, you know what, I get flooded with emails. So most of them I don't even open. So if you could make your announcements on Facebook, because I am constantly on Facebook, that's the best way to communicate with me. And it's so strange. At first, I didn't want to have anything to do with Facebook, but now it's an integral part of our marketing campaign. So and it works. It works well.
Yeah, and then going to the point, also happy customers. A perfect example. And one of the things I've always admired about Drake is you guys do a great job in having a great product, and the customer service is awesome. Everyone talks about how fast you answer your phones, right, during tax season. And a perfect example of what you just said, John. We were a couple of years ago at an event eating lunch, and one of the people there was a Drake user. And they just on their own. We're just talking about what software you use, and I use ProSeries, I use TaxWise. That what everyone was doing. Was just basically stating what software they use. But when you got to the Drake guy, Drake is the best. They answer my questions. I don't have to struggle. And I mean, that's it. A happy customer will refer people because they are happy, not because they're getting paid. Was I getting paid? No, he was just very happy with the service and the product. And that was the best form of marketing, and that's something that's awesome. I think about Drake. You're not out there being flashy or doing these big things like maybe other softwares try to do, or any other company. And this is just in general. I mean, if you look at Starbucks or Tesla, right? Build a great product, build a great service, and you don't have to be doing these mass commercials out there wasting all that money. Why not invest that money in the employees you have, in the business you have, and let the product and the service speak for itself? That's the best form of marketing, and I totally agree with you, John.
Except we do awesome podcasts. I will just,
We have an awesome podcast with a great host.
There you go.
And more to come.
That's right. More to come. Well, guys, I want to thank all three of you for joining us today. And we'll have to end it there. And we'll see everybody else on the next Taxi Subject podcast.